Oftentimes, when you hear people talk about behavioral health marketing, a constant word keeps coming up: data. Everything needs to be data driven. How do I incorporate data into my marketing strategy, into my customer acquisition strategy, into the way that we talk about reporting? And it can feel a little bit overwhelming with so many ways to understand data. How do you know what's important? How do you know what's just numbers? And what are the things that you actually need to do to make data help you? And today, that's what we're talking about. Our goal: let the data speak, how analytics should drive marketing in behavioral health. And I could not ask for a better guest than our current guest today. So we have Matthew Fung-A-Fat. He's a digital marketing leader currently at Acadia Healthcare, where he brings a sharp focus to performance, metrics, experimentation, and ethical data, keyword on ethical, in healthcare. Matthew's approach is rooted in a belief that behind every click, call, or conversion is a person seeking help, and that marketing should be measured not just by leads, but also by outcomes. In this conversation, we explore which metrics matter most, how to set up experiments that yield actionable insight, and what it looks like to scale successful strategies while not killing the message in the core of what you're doing at work. So whether you're marketing a local IOP or a national network, this episode unpacks the principles and practices of letting data inform your decisions. Matthew, thank you so much for joining me here on the podcast today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
All right, so let's start at the foundation. In behavioral health, which marketing metrics, which numbers truly matter, and which ones would you say are overrated?
When I think about marketing metrics, we're always looking at the funnel, right? There's top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, bottom of the funnel. And oftentimes operators are most interested in bottom of the funnel. They want to know what's driving admissions, right? But as marketers, we got to understand what's informing those outcomes, starting from people clicking to the website. That's where majority of our digital efforts are oriented toward, is getting people to our website. And then from there, understanding how are they digesting the information on the site. And then from there, ultimately leading to some kind of transactional action where they're reaching out through a web form or making a phone call, and then watching that phone call become a lead, and then the lead move through the process. So the way that we kind of measure all those different touch points, website traffic like users, and then like sessions per users, average time on site, that's the top funnel metrics that we look at to see the effectiveness of the different marketing efforts that are driving people to our website. And then ultimately we want to see people go from that website user to a lead, so whether that's a phone call or a web form completion. And then we like to track phone calls more like qualitatively than just, a phone call, because not all phone calls are created equal, right? Some phone calls will be for folks that are just simply looking for information about the insurance or things like that. And so we like to look at the qualitative side of the phone calls as well, like understanding the transcripts, and then how do those transcripts give us better indicators on if they're going to lead to a positive outcome from our marketing effort.
Does your call center, do the people who work at your call center rate or score each call?
I wish they did. That would be great. As of right now, we kind of just get like a yes or a no on whether or not it was a viable lead.
Oh, okay. So it's a yes or no. Interesting.
They give some information about why that person was not a qualified lead, whether it was like a financial deflection or the program was too far away, or maybe the not right level of care. But yeah.
And just backing up a second, I think that that's like an interesting point, because Acadia is a big organization. Like, how many centers do you guys have?
270 plus. It's a good amount.
Just a couple of centers, 270. And I know that there's some people who are really big sticklers when it comes to calls and like rating calls and giving them a grade, right? Like a 1, 2, or 3. And so I think it's interesting that you guys kind of have this binary system where it says, no, it's either a yes or a no. It's like good or bad. Have you guys experimented with other ways, or have you guys always done it that way?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is working with the different call center staff. So it's not necessarily like a yes or a no, like black and white. It's more of a conversation around these are the type of leads that we're seeing. Part of the challenge is that our call tracking system is kind of operated in a silo, in that the marketing team is like really the only team that's able to see what source medium is driving certain calls.
Yeah.
And so the admissions teams aren't necessarily seeing like, okay, your Google non-brand is driving these types of calls. Here's what we're seeing with these types of calls. There's a lot of conversations that have to happen for us to kind of get to, okay, it's this campaign that's driving this quality of lead. And then once we have that information, we can make adjustments on the campaign.
I got it. Okay.
Yep.
And what call tracking system do you use?
We're using Invoca.
Okay, Invoca. Usually I hear people like it's either CallRail or call tracking metrics. Why Invoca?
We found that Invoca is on the leading edge of the utilization of AI, and they're also able to handle a network of our sophistication. So we have a lot of different call centers, a lot of different IVRs. And so they're the provider that was on the cutting edge of the tech when we were looking to make a transition. So that's kind of how we went with Invoca.
Yeah. And when you say IDR, what do you mean?
IVR. So that's like different call trees. So it's like press 1 to reach admissions, press 2 for everything else, or press 3 to get in contact with staff, something like that.
Sure. Okay, cool. So just kind of summarizing some of these key stats, you have unique visitors to a web page or to a website. Then you have the amount of those people who either call or fill out a form or chat or verify insurance or something like that. That gives you your conversion rate. Right.
Yep.
And then when those people call, the quality of those leads or those people, right? So for you, it's like a or a B, a yes or a no, like qualified or unqualified. And you use other indications, things like dwell time or time on page, to determine what's the problem. So if I'm not getting as many people to the page, well, hey, my dwell time, the people aren't spending a lot of time on this page. They're clicking on it and then they're clicking away. Are there any other metrics that are kind of around there that you use to troubleshoot some key problems when it comes to like SEO or performance of your website?
Yeah, I think there's other things. If we have videos or other engagement points, we'll like to track those to see if maybe people are getting what they need on the site and they don't need to reach out to us because it was more of an informational type of user. And then, yeah, video completions. We have like these clinical questionnaires that help kind of ask people certain questions about what they're researching and if they may be a good candidate for treatment. So we'll look at those indicators as well.
We just got out of a session for the recovery.com marketing summit. And one of the questions that people in the audience had was, what's like a good dwell time or time on page for a site? What I've seen in my own experience, I'm curious what you think. I'm always shooting for at least a 2.5 to 2 minute range. That's enough to be able to say that somebody's finding some value. They were able to click on something. They're able to get what they need. Anything below that, usually something's lacking or they're having to go somewhere else to be able to get that kind of thing. Are you seeing anything different? How do you think about time on page?
No, I think it's pretty accurate. We had in the past come up with like our own quote unquote engagement score or engagement metric or engaged user. And I think we were looking at 90 seconds plus some click activity, whether it was opening up a toggle or like watching a video, something like that. And then it also depends on the service line because we operate 3 primary service lines. So one is our inpatient hospitals, which is more like acute stabilization type of care. The other is our specialty service line, which is what other folks will call residential. So like 30, 60-day stays. And then we have our outpatient medication assisted treatment clinics. And so the type of user on those sites is going to vary. So the folks who are on the inpatient hospital site, we're like looking to get information really quickly so that they can get a better understanding of whether or not it's a good fit for them. Is it close? Do they offer the level of care that they need for the situation they're in? So for the inpatient hospitals, we're looking for not necessarily short time on sites. We're not trying to like overshare information on the amenities or things like that, because really it's someone looking for stabilization, emergent type of care. Whereas like our residential or specialty business, we want people to go to multiple pages. We want people to look at our amenities and all those types of things. So we kind of have to look at time on site by like different service lines and things like that.
That's a really good point. So somebody in detox, you don't expect them to be on their location page very long,
right?
Because they need it now. They'd rather call. They don't want to read. But somebody who's considering residential care, they're going to be there for weeks.
Yeah.
And so they really want to know more of the nuances and the details. And so they're going to be, of course, they're going to be on that page more, right?
Yeah.
And so that also has to do with if you're creating a squeeze page or a landing page, you're going to have to include different kinds of content depending on that page. So I think it's an interesting nuance to think about time on page, depending on level of care. It's super important.
Yeah.
So you've talked about the importance of experimentation. How do you design marketing experiments in a way that are rigorous, but still realistic within a treatment center's operational flow?
Yeah, I like to think about experimentation as a way to improve getting information to the end user. I think
Mm.
you introed well into say that like behind every click is a human. And I think whenever I'm thinking about experimentation, I don't want to necessarily experiment just for the sake of experimentation. There's always some kind of improvement that I'm looking to make. It
Yeah.
could be time on site, it could be engagement rate or decreasing bounce rates. But just on the outset, I don't like to experiment for the sake of experimentation. That being said, I think our space is a very complicated space. And so experimenting with language and sizing of images, sizing of buttons are all things that we've tested to make access to care more accessible. So that's kind of the way that I like to look at experimentation is like, how can I make my site easier to use? And like the best way to do that is through experimentation.
You know, you're a marketer in behavioral health when you spent an hour-long call talking about button color, right? Like you're thinking about, oh, it should be this color. Oh, there's not enough contrast, or
Mhm.
we should use this language. And the thing that you can always come back to is, okay, let's test it. Let's
Yeah.
test it. Let's test it. When you are testing it, how do you test it? What software do you use? Do you use A/B testing? What do you do?
Yeah, so an example of a test that we ran that's kind of like a button color type of test. We have our medication assisted treatment clinics. We operate, I think, 170 locations, all off of one domain. So the way that we built this test, I guess we were wanting to increase the number of web form completions from our locations pages. The baseline that we had was just like a sticky envelope icon on the header, top of the fold, no words or anything like that. So we were like, okay, that's not very clear as to what that is. So let's try doing like email plus the word email plus the envelope,
Mm,
the word submit web form
mm,
plus the envelope, and then the baseline.
mm,
Because we have 170 locations, we split the traffic in thirds by location. So
mm.
we sent third amount of the traffic to these locations, third amount of the traffic to the email plus mail icon, and then third of traffic to like submit a web form.
Yeah.
And we found that the submit the web form plus the envelope perform the best, which intuitively makes sense, but that's not something that we had thought about including in like the initial design. So that was nice to see like a clear winner on that one.
Yo, I love that point because the other thing that you're doing is prioritizing clear language,
Mm,
right? We were just talking about this in a session, but one of the problems that people have is they'll say really vague language on a button. Take your first step or
mhm,
begin your journey or start now. And the question is, what am I starting? What does
right.
my journey look like? What do you mean? And if you aren't sure, if there's a button on this table and it was saying press me and you weren't sure what that button did, you'd be a little hesitant to like press it.
Right.
But we do the same thing on our websites all the time. We put these really vague buttons and we expect people to just know what we're thinking. And surprise, surprise, the most clear and like straightforward way won out. And you have a great use case because you have so much traffic and so many different ones. So for smaller centers who are listening or watching this and they're like, I don't know what to say. Look at these big treatment centers who are doing this kind of testing and see what they're doing, because chances are there's a reason behind it. Even small things that you're like, oh, that they just did that because no, there's probably some tried and tested reasoning or experimentation that's gone into this that's made it something that's verifiable, and you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yep. 100%.
So when we're talking about data, I mean, you gave a great example about how it let you double down or pull the plug on like a specific marketing initiative. What was the aha moment and like another example of how data kind of transformed the way you thought about things?
Yeah, I can give an example of a way that data made us think we were doing things correctly, but it ended up not working very well.
Okay.
This was, I think, back in like 2018, maybe. We were using a call tracking provider that wasn't Invoca. And I guess we were a bit skeptical on kind of like the attribution model that was being used. And so because of that, we did some analysis to say that, like, okay, the average time on site that yields an outcome of a phone call is around 5 minutes.
Mm,
So we set up a action event to fire an event for time on site 5 minutes.
mm,
And that's what we started optimizing our ad spend toward. And because of that event, we saw a lot lower cost per event on our display advertising.
Mm.
And so because of that, we started investing more in display advertising because our cost per 5-minute time on site was so much lower than our non-brand paid search, just for simplicity's sake. And so we kept going further and further into our display, but like we didn't start to see improvements on the business metrics. So we didn't see improvements on all calls or improvements on inquiries or admissions. And so we went back to the drawing board and said, like, why did we go after this metric in the first place? It's because we were skeptical of the attribution model. So why don't we revisit the attribution model and maybe adjust what we're doing there and see if we see improved outcomes from that? And that's what we did. We switched, I think, like a multi-touch or a U-shape attribution model from like a last click. We started optimizing toward calls again rather than time on site, and we saw much better business outcomes from that.
Yeah, that is such a big part to think about because you want whatever call tracking software that you're using to be able to communicate with whatever ad platform that you're using, right? And so it has to pull some sort of data to be able to inform this is a good person, show this ad to more people like this, right? And I've seen that dance happen too, where you'll do call time. I've seen call time work where they say, okay, we only want to optimize for people who have been on the phone for 5 minutes or more, or 3 minutes or more, right? It's not somebody who just called and hung up.
Right.
Go get more people like that. But it has its problems too. People will call and they'll ask a lot about a lot of different programs, and maybe you're referring out to another program or whatever, and it's not necessarily indicative. And that's why lead scoring can be a really powerful metric.
Yeah.
Right. Ultimately, that's kind of the gold standard is if you can make your lead scoring for you guys, it's a yes or a no, but for other people, it's like a 1, 2, 3, or 4. And you can set the rubric for what that is and have that talk to whatever advertising platform that you're using, then it's going to go show more people. Otherwise, it'll show it to people who don't have the insurances that you accept, aren't in the locations that you're looking for, don't treat the things that you're doing, or aren't in the demographics of the people that you serve. Right. So that data is essential, especially if you're dropping millions of dollars on ads every month, which I think you guys definitely are. So I got another one. Getting back to the humanness, we hear so much about AI and data. In healthcare, there's always like this tension between data and empathy, right? How do you ensure that your marketing strategy never loses sight of the human behind the numbers?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there's a couple of things. So I like to encourage the team that's running our ads to be very conscious of the people that are clicking on our ads. There's a couple of ways to do that. Like we can look at search terms. That's something that we should be doing just for the health of our paid search program anyways. But like it gives the team insights into how these people are searching, what they're searching for. And it's like, okay, this is not just a click. There's a real intent behind the person that's searching this way. So that's one way to kind of remind ourselves of the humanity is our keyword strategy is pretty basic in terms of the terms that we're actually going after. But because of the different match types and things like that, we have lots of visibility into the different search terms. And so that helps. It's not just someone like drug rehab near me. It's like a much more long tail keyword that's being searched. I was like, okay, there's a human behind that. So it's like a good reminder on that front. I also have the teams running the ads. They actually build landing pages as well, which will include patient testimonials. And so I always encourage them to be reading those patient testimonials to remember that the efforts that you're putting into the advertising program could and will lead to people seeing success in their recovery. Having those testimonials there is just a nice reminder for them to do that. And then in terms of ad copy, we're always trying to work with our content team to make sure that what we're putting in front of people is non-judgmental, welcoming, and meeting people where they're at in terms of their recovery and wanting to support them however we can.
Yeah. Most call tracking platforms will record the calls of the people who are calling. And when I first got into behavioral health, the thing that I did the most was listen to calls.
Yeah.
You can listen to calls. If you're a marketer in behavioral health and you're not listening to calls, then you need to stop whatever the heck you're doing and go listen to calls for the next 24 hours, right? And what you learn is you start to see patterns. You start to hear common questions that are being talked about over and over again. You start to hear the pain in people's voices. You start to realize the gaps in your website and the things that are unclear because people called because they weren't sure and they wanted to know more. And so we talk a lot about data and we always think about data as numbers, but data can also be qualitative.
Right.
And it's the feelings behind what people are doing. So qualitative data via listening to calls or voice of customer data, VOC, is imperative. Use the words that people are actually using when they're considering or looking for treatment. I changed the way that we operate our articles on recovery.com to have what we call a starter series. And basically it's like behavior health questions in the words of people who were calling, right? So people were often asking, what kind of treatment do I need? What's the right level of care for me? Or they actually didn't know the word level of care. They'd say things like, what kind of therapies are best for my condition? How can I pay for treatment? What do I do after treatment? And creating articles or content around those specific questions shows that you really care about what they're saying.
Yeah.
And that you're listening and meeting them where they're at.
Yeah.
The other thing, have you worked with user testing at all?
Not a whole lot.
The other thing that user testing is really expensive, but recovery.com does it all the time. And user testing can take your landing page and put it in front of the specific demographic. So in the state that you're serving, in the area that you're serving, the age group that you're trying to reach, the gender, people who have suffered from the condition that you serve or whatever, you can specify down to that level of detail. And it will show your landing page and it will ask them key questions that you can choose. Do you trust this website? Why or why not? What parts of this website are confusing? And we're doing this all the time at recovery.com with landing pages over and over and over again. And we're learning a ton. And it gives us a lot of insight into not just like the user experience or the UX, but also like what makes somebody trust something? What makes something clear? And so along with all of the analytics data, that is stuff that you need to know. It's a muscle that you have to work out. That qualitative data cannot be understated.
Yeah. Definitely agree with that.
Any other types of metrics that are on the qualitative side that you look at?
No, I mean, I think you nailed it. Listening to phone calls, like I'm always listening to phone calls. I'm always having the team listen to phone calls, especially when we're seeing a drop in conversion rate, things like that. Another one would probably be looking at the contents of web form submissions and chats, very similarly to phone calls. Because there's a lot of information that we can gather from that as well. That's just another way of just listening to the voices that are trying to reach out to us.
Yeah, one of the cool things that I've seen companies do is they start company meetings with a web form inquiry of somebody who's looking for care.
Oh, wow.
To set the orientation of the meeting, right? And they'll say, you know, I'm in California and my daughter is struggling with depression and she's changed her friend groups and she's isolating and she's had a lot of emotional outbursts lately and I'm just at my wit's end and I don't know what to do, right? And it really does a good job of reorienting you back. But it comes through those form fills, right? And you can read them and it can be authentic and still keep it anonymous. And it's a powerful way to be able to tell those stories.
There was actually one other thing on the qualitative side. I think another way that we get qualitative information is by talking with our facility leaders. So we talk with our admissions teams, we talk with our business development teams, and we talk with like the CEOs of our hospitals and treatment centers, and they're boots on the ground. They're in the milieu and they kind of know what they need from marketing and from the type of patients that we're looking for. And so being close partners with them has really helped our marketing program be a lot more successful.
That's so smart. And it's something that I wish I would have done a better job of when I was doing marketing, is partnering with business development too, because they're talking to the providers who have these really important questions that you also need to be answering. You need to be making sure that you're fairly representing the services that you do, you're answering the questions that users have, and that you're also providing all the information for people who might refer to you as a treatment center, because that's important too, and using that language. There is one more thing I was thinking about. Listening to calls and that qualitative data also lets you understand where people are dropping off at. What's the friction, right? For example, I worked with a treatment center and they would say, "Thank you for calling X treatment center. This is Marissa." And just wait for the other person instead of leading the conversation with a question. Who am I talking with today? What's going on? How can I help? Right? Anything other than making that person. And we realized that like we actually needed to take charge of the conversation by leading with a question and having some set call flows, right? So that people could take ownership. Otherwise, people are like, I don't know. I'm calling about my daughter. And, you know, and so that's a really helpful thing too, but you only get that through actually listening to calls. So when it comes to tracking the patient journey digitally, especially across like different touch points in time, what's possible without relying on cookies, right? So our healthcare system and the way that we do things, we have to be ethical, like people don't like feeling like we're tracking them across all these different things. And there's been a lot of change within the industry about using cookies and if that's okay. What strategies or technologies have you found most useful and compliant?
That's a big question on how do we kind of ethically go about managing the tracking of the websites, utilization of cookies and all of that. We're kind of in the middle of all of it. We had implemented kind of an in-house solution that was masking IP addresses before we were sending them to any other parties as kind of our initial approach. But since I've moved into a fully opt-in consent model.
Mm,
So on all of our website properties, the default tracking method is opt out. You're only visible through our analytics systems if you opt into tracking. So we went live with that in April. And since then, we've seen probably an 85 to 90% decline in visibility
yeah.
on our metrics. So losing source, medium, all those things on websites, our website tracking went down significantly. Our ability to attribute phone calls to different sources and mediums went out the window. And so because of that, we've stopped all of our automated bid strategies because we can't send Google many events anymore unless people are opted into tracking, which is very few and far between.
Right.
And so we've kind of moved toward a very like old school marketing mindset where we're looking at kind of trend analysis and modeling outcomes and based off of our channel mix. It's something that we're working through, and there are some other solutions that we're looking at to help us with some of the privacy policies and things like that. There's also different state level requirements for privacy laws. So we're looking at maybe doing state level or different consent strategies based off of states. So yeah, we're kind of in the middle of it.
You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of like people who become so dependent on technology and then the technology is suddenly taken away and you're having to look back at how did people used to get around without Google Maps? Oh,
Right.
they used actual maps. How do I read a map? And suddenly that skill becomes extremely useful, right? Without like the digital component. And so some of those tried and true marketing skills and talking about brand and how important brand is really becomes a big deal when we have to be much more honest about the way that we track people and giving people their privacy back. Now, I wish other industries were also held to the same standard, right? But that's where we're at. And I think for a good reason, because we're working with an extremely vulnerable population.
I was just gonna say, I do think it is kind of a fine line to walk because I feel like my objective as a healthcare marketer is to be able to connect people with life-changing care. It's a little frustrating to not have the same tools to be able to do that. And I know that not everyone can be trusted to act ethically with the data, but it's unfortunate that a few people have made it so that others can't execute the marketing strategies to help connect people with care.
It's like, well, this is why we can't have nice things.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Right. So many treatment centers say that they want to be data driven. It's like that buzzword, but struggle with fragmentation across different platforms. I've got my CRM, my EMR, all of the different acronyms, my ad platforms. Where do you recommend they start? So if you're saying, okay, new treatment center or newish, or I'm data illiterate right now, where do I start building some truly useful data infrastructure? What would I do?
I think Excel is going to be your best friend. I, as a marketer, never thought that I would be in spreadsheets all day, but that's where I find myself a lot of the time. Building out kind of your baseline funnel would be where I would start. I would look at website tracking. So like how many users am I generating from different sources, and then look at being able to export that into an Excel spreadsheet. And then whatever you're using as your kind of primary client outreach, so whether phone call, web form, chat, being able to export that data into another spreadsheet. And then lastly would be like the CRM, and then knowing where like you're documenting your inquiries and then where they're at in their different stages, whether they're evaluating, doing assessments, scheduled admission, and then finally admission type of data. Export all of that into a spreadsheet, put together some different combo tables to marry all of that data together over different time periods, whether you're doing it daily, weekly, and then kind of creating whatever views you think are going to be most helpful to get that full funnel view with an Excel spreadsheet. We've taken that approach, and then more recently, we've moved over into looking at a lot of our funnel analysis through Looker Data Studio, like former Google Data Studio. Because we don't necessarily have like a centralized data warehouse for our marketing information, we're essentially building a data structure in Excel, moving it into Google Sheets, and then powering our Looker Data Studio widgets and tables and graphs through Google Sheets.
It's not a super easy process, but if you can break down each of those ingredients, it's like start tracking how many people come to your website. How long do those people stay on your website? How many of those people click on an action that's helpful, right? Usually you can get most of that through something like Google Analytics. You can also use a tool called Amplitude. Amplitude's cool because it can kind of democratize the availability of that data. You can chat with it and it can provide some dashboards and stuff for people who are even really data illiterate. The second thing is like, make sure that your call tracking metrics is set up with your website.
Yep.
Right? So that you have a unique calling number depending on where people are coming from. And that gets more tricky, as we talked about, with like not tracking sources. But when I worked at an agency, the number one problem that people had was that their website and their call tracking wasn't set up, or their form system and their website weren't set up. That's not going to help you with your ads. It's not going to help you with your organic. You're not going to have any good data. So the action that you want people to take and the people who are coming to your website, you need to make sure that those things are talking to each other. And then that'll help with a lot of stuff with your CRM. But if you can at least start there, that might be a good place. I feel like your stuff has probably been set up for so long. And that seems like, of course you would do that, right? But for many people, I've seen that just not been the case.
Yeah. Coming back to the human experience that's behind the clicks, it's like someone searching, so then they're going to click on your ad, and then measuring what they do on your website. We all kind of generally know what the goal of our ad campaigns are, but then like having the proper measurements in place to be able to improve those campaigns is really, it's what's important.
Absolutely. All right. I got a final big question for you. You ready for this? So looking ahead, take out your crystal ball, wave your hands. How do you see data shaping the future of behavioral health marketing? And what should treatment centers be preparing for now if they want to stay ahead?
I feel like it's a bit of a cop out or a cliche, but like I think AI is going to be important for all industries, including behavioral health. There's talks about generative AI, agentic AI. I think there's going to be a lot more opportunity to create like personalization because of AI being able to augment people's abilities to generate unique headlines, more ad copy, things like that. And then being able to deploy smarter campaigns based off of data that an AI algorithm can operate off of much faster than someone like myself could. They're able to digest so much more information so much faster. So I think it's going to get smarter and faster. And then ultimately, I think that will help connect more people to life-changing care, which is, all of our objectives.
Yeah, absolutely. Where can people go to learn more about you and all the awesome work you're doing?
You can visit our website at acadiahealthcare.com. That'll kind of give you a bit more information about the company. I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. I'm not super active on those things, but you can come find me and connect.
Cool. Listeners, watchers, if you want to learn more about Matthew or Acadia, you'll find links for those in the description box and the show notes below, wherever you're consuming this content. And remember, the better your marketing, the more people you can help. We'll see you on the next episode.